even though it's in the middle of a space battle, but you're actually writing some very simple emotions, and your score is allowed to really kind of control the scene even more than some fantastic visual effects people are seeing. So talk a little bit about kind of tackling that sequence.
I mean, that idea for me goes way back to when I was doing video games. I worked on a series of video games called the Medal of Honor, and there was a bunch of those. There were scenes in there where, I'm a huge history buff, and as we're getting into this and making these games, I mean, so much of what we were doing was very sad to me. I felt, we're working on this, here we are. You can't help it. It's a game where you go around, you shoot people. It is what it is. Yes, you're shooting Nazis, which is fair enough. No complaints there. That's okay. But the idea that you're really just going out there and killing people, that was always really kind of sad to me. And in particular, what really happened during this one scene that we were working on, and Steven Spielberg was the producer of these games, and he was working on Saving Private Ryan at the same time. So we would have these meetings, and one of the things that struck me was, this one town, Arnhem, which they blew the shit out of just so that, not to get into a big history lesson here, but for no real reason, and just no one else could have it, basically. And so many people lost their homes and their lives and the kids and everything. It was just a terrible point in the war, and one of the game levels was this moment in history. And they were like, yeah, it's going to be a big action thing. We're going to go through, and you're going to go, and you're going to da-da-da. I just thought, that's terrible. That sounds awful. And so I just wrote completely counter to that. And I wrote this very simple melody with this boys' choir and the orchestra. And it's a very emotional thing. And we placed that against it. And it was like kind of like, wow, this turns this into a whole different experience. Because, yeah, you're still going through doing what you need to do, but there's a sense of kind of important to it and import to it that you don't think of when you're just blindly going through and there's action music going. So that was an idea back then that kind of carried into other things like Lost and even in Alias at times, and JJ feels the same way about those things. JJ is always going to go for what's the emotional center of the story. He cares about how the characters relate to each other and all of that. Everything else around it is somewhat dressing in a way, and it's always to him about the people, and I love that about him. I love that about his films and his TV shows. So again, it became a natural thing when we were working on Star Trek that during this big battle scene, this big thing, it wasn't going to be about the fact that they are being shot at and the ship is blown apart. It was going to be about the fact that this guy is sending his wife off and she's having this baby that he knows he'll never see. And that's what it became about. So. And again, I love the fact that he allows me to do that, because there are a lot of people that wouldn't. I mean, I could name a bunch of other, I won't name them, but, other directors who would have taken that same scene and just made it into a balls to the wall kind of, action moment, and kind of, I think, lost the whole anchor of what that film is about. So, again, he's really great about that.
And you just did music for Disneyland Star Tours, right?
In the middle of, yes.
You're in the middle of doing that. So as far as I know, you're the only guy who scored Star Trek and Star Wars.
To be fair, John Williams scored Star Wars, and that music and those themes and those melodies will always be a part of that universe. And for me, it's really a job about making sure that all of that is used properly and in the right way, and then arranging it and getting it orchestrated so that it actually works with the new ride. So the new attraction.
So what's the difference between writing for Star Trek and writing for Star Wars?
Well, Star Trek I get to make up what I want to make up. With Star Wars, I'm kind of working with existing stuff that is there, which I wouldn't want it any other way, because again, that's the way it should be. But it's always a great learning experience too for me to actually get in and look at the scores and look at all the stuff that he did for those films. I have one of my favorite things that I have on my shelf is I have the whole score to Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is Herbert Spencer did the orchestrations for, and it's an amazing thing just to look at. And I love kind of like going through the score and imagining the film in my head, and going, oh yeah, that's it, and just seeing how they actually but that's getting really geeky, so.
That's what we're here for. Anyone in the audience have a question for Mike Giacchino? Come on, you chicken. Nobody? You.
Thank you. I've been a huge fan of your music since I was obsessed with Alias, and it's so crazy to me because you can bring so much suspense to a scene, and it gets really intense before I know it, I'm like on the edge of my seat, and yet I cried to so much of your music, and not just from Alias, but The Family Stone, just so many things. And so I was wondering, is there a different kind of process that you go through when you're approaching a different type of scene? I mean, I know you just talked about some of it.
Well, I mean, for me, it's always, I feel like I should apologize first for your crying. I didn't mean to hurt you. But I think that, you're always going to look at those scenes, and I mean, for me, it's always, when you're listening to that music, you're listening to kind of my reaction to what I was watching. My emotional reaction is kind of what I give you back. When I'm watching that, I'm not trying to be calculating about this or that, and I want to make somebody feel this. I'm just trying to tell you how I felt when I watched it, and that was really, and that was a big part of Lost for me, was just kind of telling you how I felt when I watched it. And all those films, even, when Kirk is losing the baby, the whole thing, or when they're sailing the raft off in Lost, or all of those things are basically just kind of examples. It's my way of telling you how I feel, and hopefully it fits right with what the story is trying to tell you as well. But yeah, that's. I mean, I know it's a simple way to say it, but that's really kind of what it is.
Anyone else?
I got a question.
Sure.
I'll take
Was it your idea to put the Beastie Boys in there for that scene?
No, that was not my idea. But I liked it. I don't know. It was funny when I first heard about it. I was like, what? Wait a minute, what? But then, when you see it in the film, it's actually like, wow, yeah, no, he's right. That works great. No, yeah, it's really good.
The music made the movie.
Oh, well, thanks. Thank you.
The whole thing, Did the tribute, remember when they're going up to the Enterprise?
Yeah.
They did that big tribute thing I heard on the director's cut. He was talking about how they wanted to do the tribute to the original movie.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. There's a lot of
thematic, kind of,
Yeah, it was a whole different thing. I mean, in the original movie, that lasted like 4 years, that scene.
Right.
Robert Wise, you gotta love him, right? I mean, come on. So, but yeah, this was a truncated version of that.
Over here.
A two-part question. When you are composing, do you compose on a synthesizer, and do you synthesize the instrumentation? And the second part is, can you tell us something about the organic instruments that you chose to use in Lost?
Oh, okay, sure. Generally, what I'll do is sit at a piano first until I'm happy to come up with a melody or something that I like. If I'm working on a film, I'll go and sit at the piano and just keep playing until I come up with an idea that I like. And then I'll go into writing. And now, because of the way things work nowadays, directors want to hear things. For me, it's easiest. I have my a sequencer that is set up exactly as if it was the score page. So you have piccolo, flute, all the way down to double bass. So I'll kind of orchestrate as I write. I'll just work on it that way, and that way I have a mock-up that I can show them. They can listen to it in a synthesized way. They get an idea for what it is. We can even stick it in the film temporarily if we want to, and then we'll go and record it with the orchestra. But yeah, generally you will have to mock it up in some sense so that they can hear it, because not everyone is able to make the leap from just a piano to what it's going to be. And there's so much money being spent on this stuff these days. Nobody wants to make that leap. They want to be sure before they get there that it is what they're hoping it's going to be. As for the instruments in Lost, I mean, that evolved over time, but we did use parts of the airplane that was crashed on the island. I remember specifically the day I talked to Brian Burke, the producer on the show, and I called him and about something, I don't know, and I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm walking around a plane crash, it's fantastic. You know, I was in LA and he was in